Blind Justice presents a hero and a city with secrets hidden by the cloak of night. What's Done in the Dark, the audio drama.
Club Siren, a place of shadows and flickering neon. The air hung thick, heavy with the aftermath of the fight. The blind titans and Kevin stood, a tableau of exhaustion and anger. Dominic, their leader, his sightless eyes radiating a cold fury. He had ripped the truth from the minds of their enemies, a truth that tasted like ash in his mouth. Beside him, Irving cracked his knuckles, the metal sheen of his skin reflecting the flashing lights outside. Andre, ever the calm one, held a hand to his side, a gash already closing. Christian tapped his foot impatiently, a blur of motion barely contained. Daniel, his fingers hovering over the controls of his wheelchair, looked up at Isabella with a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. Kevin, Dominic's rock, stood slightly behind him, his hand resting on Dominic's shoulder. Even in the dim light, his face was a mask of concern. He had seen the darkness that painted Dominic's thoughts, the knowledge that twisted his features. They all turned to Isabella, waiting. Isabella stood alone. The black of her catsuit seemed to absorb the light, making her a void in the chaos of the club. Her face, framed by the black mask, was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed the storm raging within. She had known this moment would come. The moment the mask slipped, the lie shattered. She had played her part, spun her web of deception, but for how long could she outrun her past? For how long could she deny the truth that clawed at her soul?
Tell us, Isabella, tell us why.
The words hung in the air, heavy as a judge's gavel. Isabella closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was a whisper, a confession carried on the wind. It started long ago, in a land bathed in sunshine and stained with blood. And so Isabella began her tale. The club around them faded. The music, the stench of sweat and spilled liquor, the flashing lights, all gone. In its place, Isabella saw a small adobe house baked by the Mexican sun. Bougainvillea, a riot of fuchsia and crimson, tumbled over the rough walls. A parched courtyard held the ghosts of laughter, the echoes of childhood games. This was her childhood home, a place of sun-drenched shadows, where love and cruelty intertwined like the Bougainvillea vines. She was a child again, her dark hair pulled back in tight braids, her brown eyes wide and watchful. Beside her, a whirlwind of brunette curls and laughter, was her sister, her rival. Their parents, she saw now, were shadows in the background. Their faces, blurred by time and memory, held a chilling detachment. They loved their daughters, yes, but their love was a dangerous thing, a weapon to be wielded, a prize to be fought for. Isabella remembered the constant competition, the subtle manipulations. She excelled at sports, her body a weapon honed by years of backyard battles. Her sister, with her sharp mind and quiet intelligence, was the scholar, the strategist. Every achievement, every moment of triumph was tainted by the knowledge that it was a victory over her own flesh and blood. Their parents, masters of the game, pitted them against each other, reveling in their daughter's rivalry. It was a twisted dance, fueled by love and resentment in equal measure. As they grew older, the shadows lengthened. Their parents' whispers, once hidden, became pronouncements, spoken openly. The family business, the cartel, words that tasted of blood and power, words that sent shivers down Isabella's spine. Her sister, with her idealism burning bright, rejected their parents' legacy. She dreamed of a different life, a life free from the stench of corruption and violence. Isabella, hardened by years of competition, felt a grudging respect for her sister's defiance. But fear, a cold, insidious serpent, coiled in her gut. She couldn't understand her sister's naivete. Didn't she see the danger? Didn't she understand the reach of their family's influence? Their father, a man of chilling charm and ruthless ambition, would not let his daughters go so easily. And then, one day, her sister was gone, vanished, disappeared without a trace. Their parents, their faces masks of grief and fury, offered no explanations. Isabella, her heart a stone in her chest, mourned her sister in silence. But even in her grief, a seed of rebellion began to grow. She saw the darkness that permeated her family, the casual brutality that underpinned their wealth and power, the whispers of disappearances, of rivals silenced, of betrayals punished with swift and terrible vengeance. And for the first time she understood her sister's revulsion. The fear remained, a constant companion, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease, a creeping disgust. She couldn't stay, she couldn't be complicit in their world any longer. So, she did the only thing she could think of. She ran, leaving everything behind. She followed the path her sister had taken, the path north to the promised land of America. She didn't know if she would find her sister, but she had to try. She owed her that much. America. The word held such promise, such hope. But for Isabella, it was a land of shadows and whispers, a place where the past was never far behind. She searched for her sister, her heart a lead weight in her chest, but she had vanished without a trace. Desperate, alone, she drifted from city to city, taking whatever work she could find. The memories of her old life haunted her, the fear a constant companion. She knew her family would be looking for her, their reach long and unforgiving. And then, fate, in its cruel and ironic way, led her to Ravenhurst, a city on the brink, its streets teeming with secrets and shadows. She found work as a secretary, a cog in the machine of City Hall. It was a mundane existence, but it offered a semblance of normalcy, a chance to disappear into the anonymity of the crowd. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Isabella, lost in the labyrinthine corridors of City Hall, buried herself in routine. Filing, typing, answering phones, anything to keep the shadows at bay. But the darkness had a way of seeping into the cracks, of whispering in the dead of night. One evening, while working late, she stumbled upon it. A file tucked away in the back of a drawer, its label a chilling whisper. The Gene X Project. Curiosity, a dangerous flame, flickered within her. She knew she shouldn't, but her fingers, trembling slightly, reached for the file. The words swam before her eyes, each one a hammer blow. Experiments, mutations, people, ordinary people transformed into something else. The file spoke of a rare gene, dormant in most, but awakened by trauma, by stress, by some unknown trigger. It spoke of abilities, powers beyond the realm of human comprehension. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. Could this be real? Could such power exist? As she delved deeper into the file, a cold dread settled over her. The language became more clinical, more disturbing. The experiments grew more daring, more reckless. And then she saw his name, Rashad. Her boss, the charismatic young politician with his eyes on the mayor's office, was the architect of this project. The file spoke of his obsession with Gene X, his belief that he could harness its power, control it. It spoke of his ambition, his ruthlessness. Isabella's blood ran cold. She had seen glimpses of that ruthlessness before, in the way he dealt with rivals, in the veiled threats, in the whispers of backroom deals. But she had dismissed them as the necessary evils of politics. Now, she saw them for what they truly were. The tools of a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The city, she realized, was his laboratory. The people, his test subjects. He was searching for them, those who possessed the Gene X, those who held the potential for power. And she unwittingly was helping him. Isabella closed the file, her hands trembling. She had stumbled upon a secret, a truth too terrible to ignore. But what could she do? Who would believe her? She was just a secretary, an insignificant cog in the machine. The weight of her knowledge pressed down on her, suffocating her. She thought of the people in the file, the ones who had been subjected to Rashad's experiments. What had become of them? Were they still alive? Or had they been discarded, their lives deemed expendable in the pursuit of power? Isabella's mind raced. She had to do something. She had to expose Rashad, stop him before it was too late. But fear, a familiar serpent, coiled in her gut. She knew the reach of his power, the ruthlessness of his methods. If he discovered what she knew. And then there was her sister. Isabella had given up hope of ever finding her. But Rashad? He knew. He had hinted at it, a veiled threat, a reminder of her vulnerability. He held her sister's fate in his hands. Torn between her conscience and her loyalty to her sister, Isabella felt herself being pulled in two directions. Could she risk exposing Rashad, knowing that it might mean condemning her sister? Or could she live with herself if she did nothing, knowing that she was complicit in his crimes? Days turned into nights. The city outside her window a tapestry of shadows and flickering lights. Isabella, trapped in a prison of her own making, wrestled with her conscience. The Gene X file, a constant reminder of the darkness lurking beneath the surface, haunted her every waking moment. Rashad, sensing her unease, watched her closely. He didn't need to say anything. His silence was a threat, a reminder of the price of her silence. He dangled the possibility of finding her sister, a cruel carrot on a stick, just out of reach. Isabella knew she couldn't keep up the charade forever. The weight of her secret was crushing her slowly but surely. She had to make a choice. But what choice was there? Betray her sister and risk Rashad's wrath, or remain silent and become complicit in his monstrous plans? As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the city, Isabella made her decision. She would play his game, for now. But she would be watching, waiting for her chance. And when the opportunity arose, she would strike, for herself, for her sister, for the city of Ravenhurst. Ravenhurst, a city of steel and glass, a monument to ambition and greed. It was a far cry from the sun-drenched streets of her childhood, the air thick with exhaust fumes instead of the scent of bougainvillea. The people, their faces etched with weariness and suspicion, moved like ghosts through the urban labyrinth. She found a cheap room in a rundown building, the walls thin, the plumbing unreliable. It was a far cry from the sprawling hacienda of her youth, but it was a roof over her head, a place to hide. At night the city sounds, the wail of sirens, the distant rumble of traffic, the muffled shouts of arguments, seeped into her dreams, a constant reminder of her isolation. Days blurred into weeks, each one a struggle for survival. She worked odd jobs, cleaning, waitressing, anything to make ends meet. The money was never enough, but it kept her afloat, kept the wolves of despair at bay. She thought of her beautiful, idealistic sister and wondered what had become of her. Had she found the peace and happiness that had eluded Isabella, or was she lost, swallowed whole by this concrete jungle? The fear was a constant companion, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. She knew her family would be looking for her, their reach long and unforgiving. She avoided contact with anyone who reminded her of her past, her secrets buried deep within. One rainy afternoon, while working at a dingy diner, she saw him. A young man, his face obscured by a pair of dark glasses, sat alone at a corner table in his wheelchair. He moved with an uncanny grace. She felt an immediate connection, a sense of kinship with this stranger. His name was Daniel, she learned, a regular at the diner. He was kind, gentle, his laughter like a ray of sunshine piercing through the gloom. He spoke of his friends, their struggles, their triumphs. He spoke of justice, of hope, of a better world. Isabella listened, her heart stirred by his words. For the first time since she had arrived in Ravenhurst, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still good in this world. Maybe, despite everything, she could find redemption. She found herself drawn to Daniel, his unwavering optimism, a beacon in the darkness that threatened to consume her. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden her soul, to seek his guidance. But the fear held her back, a suffocating weight on her chest. What if he rejected her? What if her past destroyed the fragile bond they had forged? As the weeks turned into months, Isabella's admiration for Daniel grew. She watched him from a distance, her heart aching with a longing she couldn't explain. He was everything she wasn't: kind, selfless, hopeful. He inspired her, reminded her of the girl she once was, the girl who believed in justice, in love, in the possibility of a better world. She learned more about the Titans, their powers, their battles against the forces of darkness that plagued Ravenhurst. She saw the good they did, the lives they saved, the hope they inspired, and she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she couldn't remain silent any longer. The Gene X file, a constant weight on her conscience, haunted her dreams. Rashad's ambitions, his ruthless pursuit of power, sickened her. She had to do something, had to stop him before it was too late. But how could she, a solitary figure, stand against such power? The answer, she realized, lay with the Titans. They were her only hope, her only chance at redemption. But could she betray Rashad, knowing the danger it would put her and her sister in? Could she risk everything for a glimmer of hope, a chance to atone for her past? As the sun set, casting long shadows across the city, Isabella made her decision. She would reach out to the Titans, tell them everything. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was a risk she had to take. For herself, for her sister, for the city of Ravenhurst. A seed of hope, long dormant, began to blossom in her heart. Fate, it seemed, had a way of intervening. One day, while sorting through Rashad's mail, she stumbled upon an invitation. A fundraiser, hosted by Rashad, the newly elected mayor himself. It was the perfect opportunity to make contact with the Titans, to expose Rashad's true nature. Her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear and anticipation. She knew the risks. She knew that if Rashad discovered her betrayal, there would be no escape. But she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She had to act. The decision made, a strange sense of calm settled over her. She was done running, done hiding. It was time to face her past, to confront the darkness that had haunted her for so long. The Titans were her only hope, her only chance at redemption, and she wouldn't let them down. As she slipped the invitation into her pocket, a steely glint entered her eyes. She was Isabella, and she was ready to fight. The night of the fundraising event had arrived, a suffocating blanket of heat smothering Ravenhurst. Isabella, clad in a borrowed dress and masquerade mask, navigated the opulent ballroom. Each clink of champagne glasses, each forced smile, grated on her nerves. She was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a predator stalking her prey among the oblivious gazelles. The air itself felt heavy, pregnant with secrets and lies. Rashad, resplendent in a tailored suit, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his smile as fake as the jewels adorning the necks of socialites. Isabella fought to control her disgust. She had spent months, years, curating information, feeding Rashad's hunger for power. She knew his weaknesses, his desires. Knowledge, she reminded herself, was a weapon, and tonight she intended to wield it. Her eyes, constantly searching, found their target. The Titans, Daniel and Irving. They stood out from the polished crowd, their discomfort palpable. Daniel, his wheelchair positioned slightly apart, seemed to be the eye of their storm, their anchor in the swirling chaos. Isabella's heart ached. How easy it would be to approach them, to beg for their help. But she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Not while Rashad's eyes followed her every move. And then it came. The opportunity was a gift from fate, or perhaps a cruel jest. She found herself face to face with Kenny, Rashad's right-hand man, his eyes gleaming with cold intelligence.
Enjoying the party, Isabella?
He asked, his voice a silken threat. As much as one can, she replied, her voice carefully neutral. It's not exactly my usual scene. Kenny chuckled, a low, humorless sound.
No, I suppose not. You always were more comfortable in the shadows.
His words were a barb, a reminder of her past, her secrets. Isabella met his gaze, refusing to back down. She knew his game, knew he was trying to gauge her loyalty. The shadows hold their own kind of power. Don't underestimate them, Kenny. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. He liked her spirit, she could tell, dangerous. But it was a danger she could use. Speaking of power, Kenny said, leaning closer, his voice barely audible above the music. The mayor has big plans. Plans that involve certain abilities. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. This was it. Her chance. Abilities? She echoed, feigning ignorance. What kind of abilities? Kenny smiled, a slow, predatory grin that sent chills down her spine. The kind that certain individuals in this very room possess. The Titans, for example. He was testing her, pushing her to see how much she knew. Isabella kept her expression carefully neutral, her mind racing. She had to play this right, had to draw him out without raising his suspicions. The Titans? She said, her voice a perfect blend of curiosity and disdain. Those glorified vigilantes? What good are their abilities to the mayor? Oh, I think you underestimate their potential, Isabella, Kenny said, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing light. They are just the tip of the iceberg, the beginning of something extraordinary. He leaned back, his gaze fixed on her, a silent challenge in his eyes. Isabella met his gaze, her heart pounding against her ribs. He knew she was playing a game. But how much did he suspect? And what would he do if he discovered the truth? Isabella took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. She had to make a choice. Remain silent, complicit in Rashad's schemes and risk losing everything. Or seize this moment, this fragile opportunity and fight. For herself, for her sister, for the Titans, for Ravenhurst. The choice, she realized, had already been made. Kenny's words hung in the air, heavy as stones. Isabella fought to maintain her composure, to keep her expression neutral, but inside a storm raged. Fear warred with anger, loyalty with a desperate longing for redemption. She thought of Daniel, his kindness, his unwavering belief in a better world. She thought of the Titans, their struggles, their sacrifices. She thought of Ravenhurst, the city teetering on the brink, its fate hanging in the balance. And she knew, with a certainty that burned like a brand, that she could no longer remain silent. The mask she had worn for so long, the mask of indifference, of complicity, cracked. "Kenny," she said, her voice low, urgent. "This project, it's wrong. You know it is. You've seen what Rashad's capable of." He studied her, his gaze sharp, assessing. "Isabella," he said softly, his tone laced with warning. "Be careful. You're treading on dangerous ground." "I don't care," she whispered, her voice trembling with barely suppressed emotion. I won't be a part of this anymore." A flicker of surprise crossed Kenny's face, quickly masked. He opened his mouth to speak, but Isabella, emboldened by a desperate hope, pressed on. "I know about the Gene X project," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I know what Rashad's planning. He wants to control them, use them for his own ambitions." "Isabella," Kenny began, his voice laced with warning, but she silenced him with a look. "Don't you see?" she pleaded, her voice raw with emotion. "He's not content with just being mayor. He wants more. Power, control, and he's willing to sacrifice anyone, anything to get it." She thought of the files she had read, the experiments, the lives ruined, the potential destroyed. She thought of her sister, her fate entwined with Rashad's machinations. "He's a monster, Kenny," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And I helped create him." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. The music, the clinking glasses, the forced laughter, all faded into the background. Isabella held her breath, her gaze locked on Kenny's face, searching for a flicker of understanding, a glimmer of hope. For a moment she thought she saw it, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tightening of his jaw, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a mask of cold indifference. "You're out of your depth, Isabella," Kenny said softly, his voice devoid of emotion. "You've always been too emotional, too impulsive." He reached out, his hand alighting on her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't make me regret this conversation," he whispered, his voice a silken threat. "Remember your place." And then, as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone, melting back into the crowd, leaving Isabella standing alone, her heart pounding in her chest. The die was cast. She had made her choice. There was no turning back. She had betrayed Rashad, exposed his secrets, jeopardized her own safety, and possibly her sister's, for a chance, however slim, to do the right thing. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Isabella's resolve. She had crossed a line, stepped onto a path fraught with danger. But even as terror threatened to consume her, a spark of hope flickered within. She had planted a seed of doubt in Kenny's mind. It might not be enough, might wither and die under Rashad's influence. But it was a start, and she had made contact, however indirectly, with the Titans. They knew, they understood. They were her only hope now, her only chance at redemption. Isabella drew a deep breath, the scent of perfume and desperation heavy in the air. She had to get out of here, find a safe haven, regroup. She had a role to play in the battle to come, a part to play in bringing down the monster she had helped create. The mask was gone, shattered beyond repair. Isabella, the woman forged in fire and loss, stepped out of the shadows, ready to face her destiny. Isabella's words echoed in the sudden silence of the club. The weight of her confession, the raw, brutal honesty of it, hung heavy in the air. She had laid bare her soul, revealed the darkness that lingered at the edges of her past. The guilt, the fear, the desperate hope that she could find redemption in a world that had already shown her its cruelest face. Across from her, the Titans were a tableau of shock and anger. Dominic, his sightless eyes blazing with a cold fire, clenched his fists, the metal of his braces digging into his flesh. Beside him, Irving, his metallic skin reflecting the flashing lights outside, radiated fury. Andre, his usual composure shaken, stared at Isabella with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. Christian, his need for speed a physical tic that belied his inner turmoil, paced back and forth, a caged panther. Only Daniel, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable, seemed to hold on to a shred of composure. He alone seemed to see beyond the betrayal, to the fear and desperation that fueled Isabella's actions. Kevin, his hand still resting on Dominic's shoulder, surveyed the scene with a heavy heart. He had seen the darkness that haunted Isabella, the pain that shadowed her every move. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was just the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. Isabella met their gazes one by one, her heart a lead weight in her chest. She saw the judgment, the anger, the betrayal reflected in their eyes. And she couldn't blame them. She had betrayed their trust, used them, manipulated them for her own ends. But beneath the anger, she also sensed something else. A flicker of understanding, a glimmer of empathy. They too knew the weight of secrets, the burden of past mistakes. They too had walked through the fires of pain and emerged, scarred but not broken. She focused on Daniel, her gaze locking with his. In his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own turmoil, the struggle between hope and despair, between the desire for redemption and the fear that it was already too late. "I know I've given you no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to believe me now. Rashad, he's dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. He wants to control us, to use our powers for his own ambitions. He won't stop until he has everything he desires, until he controls Ravenhurst, and everyone in it." A tense silence followed her words. The air crackled with unspoken tension, a storm gathering on the horizon. Isabella held her breath, waiting for their answer, their judgment, their rejection.
"We believe you?"
A collective gasp rippled through the Titans. Dominic's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger.
Daniel, are you insane after everything she's done?
We don't have a choice. She's right. Rashad is a threat. To us, to this city. We have to stop him.
He turned back to Isabella, his gaze piercing.
You say you want to help?
Isabella met his gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and terror. More than anything, Isabella said. A slow smile spread across Daniel's face, a smile that held both sadness and determination. The air, thick with tension moments before, now vibrated with a new energy. An energy of defiance, of hope, of a shared purpose that transcended past betrayals and future uncertainties. The battle lines had been drawn. The Titans, once divided, now stood together, united against a common enemy, and at their side, her past sins a heavy burden, her heart filled with a fragile hope, stood Isabella. The dawn was breaking over Ravenhurst, a dawn stained with the promise of blood and fire, but also a dawn that held the possibility of redemption, of change, of a future where darkness would not prevail.